Her cry shattered the silence of the tavern. It wasn't a scream, but the kind of sound that stops a man mid-sip, eyes locking for a heartbeat. Clara Hayes dropped to her knees on the warped floorboards. Her wrists were tightly bound. Blood and grime streaked across her. The blouse she wore was torn, barely hanging from her shoulders, offering little protection for her trembling body. Every mark on her was a story. Bruises, deep as ripe berries, covered her thighs. Crusted blood stained her shins. A gash oozed near her brow. She looked no older than 18, but her eyes held the weight of a lifetime of suffering. The onlookers stared like a pack of coyotes. Whiskey, sweat, and greed hung thick in the air. The keeper of the Golden Horn Tavern, Harlan Blackwood, flashed a grin and pounded the bar. $30 to open, he shouted, his voice bouncing off the beams. This one's untouched, pure as morning dew. Laughter exploded. Coins clinked. A man hollered 40. Another pushed to 50. Clara tried to shield herself, but the ropes cut deeper into her flesh. Her breath hitched. Her belly rumbled. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Blackwood circled behind her, his fingers brushing the back of her neck. "Don't look so frightened, lass," he murmured. "You'll make some fellow mighty pleased tonight." The crowd roared with laughter. To them this wasn't brutality, it was entertainment. Clara bit her lip until blood trickled down her chin. She lifted her eyes, scanning the ocean of faces, searching for even one merciful soul. There was none. Only men who saw her as a prize. Then a deep voice cut through the noise. 75! The room fell silent. Heads swiveled toward the door. A tall figure stood there, weathered skin, dust on his boots, an aura of steadiness that clashed with the frenzy inside. His name was Levi Thornton, a cattleman from 12 miles out, known for living alone since his wife passed years ago. He had just sold a drove of steers, pocketing more cash than he'd seen in ages, enough to fix his spread, or perhaps to right a wrong that had haunted him since bandits took his family long ago. Blackwood blinked. 75. You sure, old-timer? Levi nodded once. Hard cash. The room erupted again, half chuckling, half stunned. No one dared to bid higher. Blackwood snatched the bills, grinning ear to ear. She's yours. Levi stepped forward slowly, sure of his movements. He loosened her bonds with his own hands. Then, without a word, he shrugged off his duster and draped it over her shivering shoulders. Her eyes met his for a fleeting moment. In them, he saw something he hadn't glimpsed in years. Something like faith, though fragile as frost. Outside, the breeze stirred dust along the deserted lane. Clara stumbled beside him, half dazed, half terrified that this was just another trap. And maybe it was, because in Dry Gulch, Nebraska, nothing decent ever came free. But why would a solitary cattleman spend every cent he had to buy a shattered girl he didn't even know? The ride out of town was silent, too silent. The wind kicked up dust along the barren trail. Clara sat behind Levi on the mare, her arms barely grazing his back. She kept her gaze fixed on the skyline, afraid to look at him, afraid of what awaited at his place. After a few miles, Levi guided the horse near a stand of cottonwoods along a bluff. Their thick trunks cast long shadows over the scorched grass. "Time to rest," he said. He swung down and uncapped his canteen. Clara hesitated but followed. Her bare feet hit the warm earth. Levi poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Drink," he said simply. Her lips were cracked, her throat parched. She took a swallow but kept her eyes on his face. Then suddenly she flung the cup at him, splashing water across his shirt. Levi stepped back, surprised. Clara spun and dashed toward the scrub, tripping as she ran. "Hey," Levi called. "Not mad, just steady. You bolt out there, you won't last a mile in this heat." She turned, trembling. "You think I'm foolish? You paid for me. You think I don't know what's next?" Her voice cracked halfway. Levi sighed, wiping his face with his sleeve. "I ain't like those men in the tavern, girl. You don't have to run from me." For a long moment, she just stared at him, sweat and tears streaking her dusty cheeks. Levi pointed to the canteen, still half full. "Suit yourself, but you'll need this more than I do." He tossed it near her feet and started back to the mare. Clara stood rooted, her heart pounding, the heat pressing on her like a heavy weight. After a few paces, she turned, picked up the canteen, and followed him back. But even as she walked behind him, her thoughts raced with suspicions. Men like him always wanted something in return, didn't they? She didn't say thank you, but the way she clutched the canteen close spoke volumes. By the time they reached his spread, the sun was setting behind the ridge. The modest log cabin stood quietly against the twilight. Levi helped her down, firm but kind. "Sit there. I'll fetch you some water." She perched on the porch, body throbbing, watching him move about the yard like a man accustomed to peace. He returned with a clean shirt and a tin cup. "Put this on," he said. "You look like you've been through the fire." She took the shirt but changed behind the shed, peeking out every few seconds to make sure he wasn't watching. Trust didn't come easily after everything she had suffered. Her voice trembled. "You paid for me, now do it." Levi froze. "No," he said quietly. "I didn't buy you. I bought your freedom." She stared at him, eyes wide, unsure who to trust. The prairie wind carried the last rays of sunlight across the land. Somewhere deep inside her, she began to wonder, maybe, just maybe, not all men were the same. The next morning was calm and still, the kind of morning that fools you into believing the world is kind. Levi worked on the corral while Clara tried to help, though her hands still shook when she gripped the mallet. She'd slept in a real bed for the first time in months, had eaten her fill, but calm felt odd, like borrowing someone else's coat. It didn't quite fit. Levi glanced at her every now and then, not saying much. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, his voice carried weight. "You keep at it, you'll learn," he said. Clara smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. By afternoon, the heat blanketed the land like a heavy quilt. Cicadas buzzed in the trees, the air shimmered over the dry grass. Levi filled the water trough while Clara gathered kindling for the stove. For a few hours, it almost felt normal. But peace never lingered long in the West. Back in town, Garrett Slade was nursing a drink in the tavern, his pride stinging worse than his empty purse. Men chuckled about the old cattleman who had outbid him. He slammed his glass down. "That scoundrel took what's mine," he snarled. When his two hired guns nodded, he stood. "Saddle up. We're paying him a call by dusk." Levi sensed the change in the air, the kind of stillness that signals trouble. His mare shifted nervously, ears pricked. Clara was inside, scrubbing plates, humming a tune so soft it barely reached the porch. Levi stepped out, his eyes sweeping the hills. A faint plume of dust rose against the amber sky. Riders. He loaded his rifle, cool as ever. Clara caught his shift in posture and came to the door. "What is it? Are they coming?" Levi nodded slowly. "Stay inside and bar the door. Don't open it unless you hear my voice." She wanted to protest, but something in his tone stopped her. The thud of hooves grew louder. 3 silhouettes appeared against the waning light. Garrett Slade had tracked them down. He dismounted, boots grinding on cracked earth. "Evening, old man," he called. "Figured we had unfinished business." Levi stood tall, rifle cradled in his arms. The quiet between them was thick enough to cut. Clara pressed her back against the wall, heart racing. She had been owned, beaten, sold, and rescued, but maybe the true trial of her freedom was just beginning.